Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's virtual plant clinic. I'm just going to hold for a second and go over a few things while everybody starts getting logged in. Today's topic is on starting seeds and preventing or stopping weeds. So with spring right around the corner, I think this is a good topic. We're almost officially there. Just a quick note for a few of you all, if you're new, this is a webinar style class rather than a Zoom meeting. So if you have questions during the class, you're going to hit that Q&A box in your Zoom menu, type those questions in, and I'll be relaying them to David. If you have any issues, you're welcome to send me a chat, like technical questions, that kind of thing. I'll help you out. And we are recording today, so you'll be able to access this class tomorrow afternoon about this time. It usually takes us about 24 hours to get those uploaded to our YouTube page. I think that's about it for me. I am monitoring my email if anybody has any problems or gets kicked off. I was having some issues, not with the Zoom app, but with the Zoom website. So we're hoping that that won't translate over. But if anyone has any issues, please feel free to send me an email and we can get you the recording after the class. David, I'll go ahead and let you get started.
Well, good to see you, Sally, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Well, as Sally mentioned, we're not too far from spring. I guess still another week away from where it officially starts. But last few days when it was really nice and even got up to 70 degrees, I hope everybody got outside and was able to enjoy a little bit of time gardening. But what I thought is as spring is approaching and everybody's got the spring fever, this would be a perfect time to talk about starting seeds indoors. This gives us an opportunity to get a head start on things because it may still be too cold to actually go out and plant some of our summer vegetables and flowers and annuals and everything. But if we want to, we could try growing some of our own plants from inside, and it is about the perfect time to do that. It's also, interestingly enough, a time when if we're going to talk about preventing seeds from growing outside. So it kind of, I got caught up thinking about the duality of this. Like, hey, I want to talk today about how we can start seeds. We'll take some questions, and then we'll talk about how we can stop seeds from growing. So a lot planned for you today. And as I said, plenty of time built in here for questions. So send send all those, put them in the chat room to Sally. She'll sort them out and then relay them back to me. But having said that, let's go ahead and get started in talking about today's topic, which, as we see right there, is starting garden seeds and stopping weed seeds. So that's the program. Probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, for people that are new to this, and one of the things that's probably, I say, if you're new to indoor sowing, the number one mistake that I see people make, number one, most beginning gardeners, is they start too early. So I want to spend some time talking to you a little bit of detail here about how we get started and the importance of proper timing on this. So what you're looking at here, this chart, you can find it yourself there. National Gardening Association put up there, garden.org. I like this particular chart, the way it's set up, but it takes a little practice getting used to it. I think schools, you can put your zip code in there and get very localized information, because I put in there 22030, that's in Fairfax County, the zip code where I am sitting right now, where a Fair Oaks store is located. But depending exactly where you live, and this can just be in a short distance, you could be in Fairfax County even, and whether you're in the eastern part or down the southern end of the county, or you're in the northwestern end, you could have enough variation in our weather patterns that would change when you want to actually do some seed starting. So the way this chart looks, when you go down on the, what I'm calling, at least on my left side, the temperature range, last 16 degrees, last 20, last 24, last 28, so on down that chart. Our last frost date, or let me suppose, our last freeze date, when it's 32 degrees, that's actually freezing temperatures. You can theoretically, you could still get a frost even at temperatures at 36 degrees. So that's where we go, work all the way down to that 36 degrees. But most of us, hey, as long as we can stay above freezing, we're pretty good on that. So on that last 32 degree, if you look across the line, if we go all the way down to far in that scale where it says March 30, today's March 13, right? So what that's telling me is, hey, through March, there's a 90% chance that we're going to get a freeze. So this month, you're not going to be putting any freeze tender plants out there because it's 90, 100% chance they're going to get frozen out. As we progress through the season, we make it into April. I look down, let's say where it says April 10. The way that reads is on April 10, there is still a 50-50 chance of having a freeze. So a lot of times when people ask what our average freeze date is, I might use something more like, I'll often say April 20. Here you can see in this zip code, even on April 22, there still is a slight chance. There's about a 10% chance of having a freeze, but odds are kind of in your favor. So this kind of helps us predict what we can anticipate as far as those cold temperatures. Now, this is also influenced very much by what type of seeds you're growing. So I just kind of selected here at random. If I look at Serrano peppers, I'm not a big pepper person. I like the mild ones, but I've been told this is a good one that's not too hot. So maybe I decide I want to try this. When I look at the instructions, they tell me right in here, and they'll be on the back of the package, when to start seed inside. Recommended 8 to 10 weeks before transplanting. Goes in the ideal soil temperature, and transplant seedlings outside 2 to 4 weeks average after my average frost date. So this gives me good information based on my average frost date, right? So what I'm doing, and it really doesn't, it's not that complicated. I'm just kind of showing you by illustrate on here. So if I take my Merrifield Garden Center calendar that I'm sure everybody has at home, and I look at that, and based on my chart, and if I decide, okay, hey, April 22, I'm going to use as my average last freeze date, I would count backwards from there 8 to 10 weeks. So if I go back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh. So that's telling me that these seeds I can start now. I'm within that time period of that sort of early March. So that's kind of how it works. Based on the seed you're growing, this one again is telling me it's another pepper. They're kind of 8 to 10 weeks. This particular seed is kind of neat. It's a little milkweed. This one's actually telling me that the seed requires what we call scarification. It requires a chilling period before it can actually be planted outside, a stratification period. So they're telling me to put these in the refrigerator for several weeks before trying to sow it in there. So you go to the package, kind of get your information there on specifics of the seeding. You can go to that website just showing you, calculate where your dates are, and then get going. Understand, just be really clear, those are dates that you can get started. If you say, oh, wow, I'm a little bit behind, you didn't miss the date. You can continue to sow even later into the season and everything. So don't feel like you're too late on doing it. That's just kind of telling me, hey, that's kind of like the earliest I would get started. Because what will happen too often is we start our seeds early inside because we're all excited, and they start growing and they're growing and growing, but it's still too cold for them outside, and they get a little tall, leggy, they're growing out of bounds. We end up having to transplant them. So that can be a little bit of an issue with starting too early. Really no problem if you decide to start too late. So that's kind of an important thing there. Get your timing right, but for a lot of things that you want to grow, peppers, tomatoes, trying to think, a lot of your summer things, maybe even like basil and so forth. Right now is probably a good time to get started, now or the next couple weeks. So let's say you decide, hey, I want to get started. I've got a couple other pictures to show you the supplies we're going to need and sort of the step-by-step process we'll go through. So you calculate it out when you're going to start your seeds going. Some of the basic ingredients that you're going to need, as we already mentioned, obviously seeds. One of the things we do is I think we represent probably about 7 different seed vendors. What you can see right there. Burpee, Lake Valley that's in there. I've grabbed some seeds here from Botanical Interests, Roar Seed, so, we sell seed from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. So we represent many different companies that send their seed racks in. So you get a big range of choices and options, and you get to go through and have fun. And what it does, it gives you a chance, maybe you want to pick something different or unusual. Again, like these cool little, I can't even say it, it's a Pekino red and yellow blend peppers. I had these ones at a restaurant, but I've never ever seen anybody selling the plants. So maybe I decide, hey, I want to grow that from seed. So you'll need seeds. You definitely want a seed starter mix. So we sell 2 or 3 different ones. I don't really care which brand you use. But what's unique about seed starter mix is that they're already ready to use. It's peat moss. It will have some vermiculite in there. They screen it to pick out any large chunks so you don't get any big pieces of bark or anything that you might find in regular potting mix. So it's got the ideal texture where it's going to hold moisture like a damp sponge. It's going to drain and aerate well. And super important, these are sterile. They're soilless mixes. So we want to start out with a very clean environment that doesn't have the risk of any pathogens that are in there. So this is Andrea that worked for us many years. She's fell in love and moved off with her husband, not with us any longer. But she was demonstrating for us one time where she's showing us the seed starting mix that's in there. You'll need some type of container to start your seeds in. I personally love these trays and inserts because you can buy them different sizes. They're very convenient to use, easy to transplant out of and everything. So these work well. Some people just use things from around the house, anywhere from egg cartons to Dixie cups. We've got other things that are made out of pressed peat. Many, many different choices, some type of container to do your seeding. But once you've kind of got a seed mix, we filled our tray, kind of tamped it down right there. Of course, you're also going to need a few other things, like make sure sometimes what we like to use is a humidity dome to put over that. So here we are, we've put the seeds in the tray, and let's go what's next. Most seeds do not really want to be buried very deeply. So you put them just at the surface or just slightly under. Again, the seed package usually has good information on that. But some of these, like if you're growing, just say, poppy seeds, think about that, teeny tiny little seeds. You don't need to bury them very much. So in here, what Andrea is doing is she's basically broadcasting or scattering them in the seed tray, and then she's going to cover them with just a very thin layer of the seed starting mix to sort of hold them in place and keep them moist. So after sowing the seeds, it's also critical, we're going to come back and water them. Now, watering seedlings is a little bit different. I don't like using a watering can or anything like that, because the force of the water, even if it's got a rosette or a breaker on, oftentimes the force of that water will disturb the soil surface, make a big mess, scatter the seeds around and stuff. So I really do like to use a mist. Commercially, they'll use a mist attachment on a hose, but for you, it can be a spray bottle we show in there. Ideally, the media has been, you moisten it down a little bit even before seeding, and then you can just heavily mist this to keep it damp. We don't want it soaking wet. We don't want it dry. It wants to feel sort of like a damp sponge. So after you've moistened it really well, again, this is not required, but I love putting one of this humidity dome, that clear plastic cover. Think of it as creating almost your own mini greenhouse in there. So it's going to trap that humidity to help keep it moist in there, which the seeds need for good germination. Also makes it easier for you as far as the frequency of watering. These are like your little babies. I'm sure you're going to be checking on them at least once a day to see if anything's growing yet. Is anything growing yet? A lot of these things might pop up within a few days. Some of them might take a couple of weeks. You'll check the moisture that's in there. If you're using this humidity dome, You might still end up having to spritz a little bit of water in there, maybe even every couple days, but it cuts down a lot. Without this humidity dome, you might need to spritz them down a couple times, a few times each day. It just depends. So keep a close eye on them, keep it moist, but not soaking wet. Eventually those seeds will start to germinate and grow in. Let's see where you've got. And what will happen is, because this is like it looks like marigold seedlings, a lot of times everything sprouts. You put too many in there because you think, well, seed's cheap. I want to make sure everything works. So I'm plant one, but I'm going to plant 5 just to be sure. Nothing wrong with that, but after they begin to sprout, you will want to come back and thin them a little bit. The seeds on what I'm calling my left, which look like I'm going to make a guess, maybe that's a zinnia or maybe even a cucumber, who knows, but I'm going to say a zinnia. The first 2 little leaves that come up, those aren't true leaves. We call that kind of cotyledons. After those seed leaves come up, then the next set are the true leaves. So after we've got a full set of true leaves, maybe even a couple, you'll want to thin out the weak, spindly ones. Ultimately, I'm going to have like 1 plant per cell in there is the goal, but I may gradually thin that out. Thin the weaker ones, keep the strong ones, and eventually we'll thin them out to where we get just sort of 1 seedling, 1 plant in there. So it has room to grow without competition. As far as growing these plants, when we start to see the true seeds come out, that's the time when I might start to fertilize them. But I'll do that with a very, very dilute mix. So here I'm just showing like an all-purpose type of fertilizer, nothing fancy on here. You can use whatever you want. This is just an all-purpose, but it's a liquid concentrate. So what I would do is put about 1/4 of what's recommended on here into my spray bottle. So on this fertilizer, I would only put probably maybe put like 5 drops into a mister like this and just fertilize them as I'm spraying them to keep them watered with that. It's a good way to do that. The thing that I would say is also very, very important, which I'm going to say is our second most common error that we have, is that they need good sunlight. Most of us don't have sufficient sunlight in our homes to really grow strong, sturdy seedlings. If you do, that is fantastic. Keep in mind, when sunlight hits a window, a lot of that is lost through reflection and refraction. And also remember that as you move further and further back from the window, you start to lose the intensity of sunlight, dissipates at an exponential rate. So if I'm growing these relying on just a bright window, I want to get them as close to that window as possible. They're going to bend towards the sunlight, so that means I'm going to also have to rotate my seed tray around to get a uniform growth rate out of it. What works really well, if you're trying to do this, is the best thing is if I can grow them under lights. So if I was doing that inside, I'd probably get myself some LED lights, set that on timer, keep that light on for something like 12 hours a day to provide a nice good light and get good, strong, sturdy seedlings. The third most common thing, and this is actually where I have made mistakes over and over again, because again, this is not something technology can help with. This is something that you just have to do as a gardener. But when I talk about when they reach that little seedling stage, they've been coddled. You know, you've had them in your house, you've been misting them, you've had this little humidity dome off of them, you're gently feeding them, you're thinning them, you're pampering these little seedlings, and they're growing fantastic. They are not ready to go out into the harsh, cruel world on their own. They have not acclimated to that. So what we do, there's this term we call hardening off. We have to get those plants acclimated and adapted to life outdoors. So I can't take them from inside my coddled environment and put them out in the full direct sun, because they will get sunburn. I can't take them from that sheltered environment and place them out into a very windy condition, because the wind will just desiccate and dry them. They need to be adapted to that, or like I said, we use this word hardening off over a period of several days. It's like for even what we do here at the garden center, for example, is we don't grow plants ourselves, but we get them from commercial growers that had them in unheated greenhouses. So they've been pampered, but not in a heated environment. We'll take them, we'll put them sometimes into our outdoor kind of greenhouse. We have these we can open and close or kind of manage the environment. If it's a really harsh weather forecast, we wheel them into the store overnight. But we get them acclimated to where they can actually then help transition out into the garden. Can't tell you how many times I've had these little seedlings I've been growing for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It's their moment of truth. I put them outside, I forget they're out there, and I come back and they're all beat up or sunburned or something like that. It's only a process, takes maybe a week or so, several days to a week. And then they're ready to go outdoors into your garden or planter, again, based a little bit on where your frost dates are. So that's my kind of just a few pointers, quick pointers and encouragement to start growing from seeds. And let's touch base with Sally. Have we had any questions, any inquiries at all about starting seeds indoors?
We do not have any questions yet. Everybody, if you have any questions and want to send them in quickly, we'll take them. Otherwise, okay, here's our first one. Can you repeat the process of hardening? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. So this again, I want to say this is specifically starting seeds indoors. And the whole reason we do this is because we want to get a head start on the season. So I might have a tender plant like a tomato or pepper that I'm going to start inside. I kind of neglected to say there are other plants. Let's say I'm growing a hardy plant like lettuce or carrots. You could probably go outside and direct sow lettuce or carrots directly into the garden bed where they could grow because they adapt well and grow better in that colder weather. So back to what you're asking about the hardening off. So I'm starting these seeds inside. I get them up. They're maybe 3 inches tall. It's pretend now that we are in late April, and I'm thinking, okay, I want to get this plant planted out in my garden. Before we go directly out there, what I will do, for example, I have a porch at my house that has the wall of the house, and it's got a little bit of a wall on 2 sides, so it's protected from strong wind. I might put them out there at first, sheltered from any kind of strong wind. And if the temperatures are getting cold, then I can still bring them back inside. So I want to protect them from direct sun. I want to protect them from wind. I'm also watching my weather forecast to protect them from any freezing temperatures. So we do that kind of process for probably, I'm going to say 5 to 7 days. After that is we're kind of gradually introducing them to outdoor life, where maybe they get gradually acclimated to the full sun. Then we can go ahead and plant in the garden. This is much like if I decide, hey, I'm going to come down there and visit you, Sally. I show up in Florida and it's so beautiful. I decide, well, I'm going to go out there and lie on the beach. Well, I have not adapted to that, and I'm going to get sunburned. Give me a few hours at a time, let me get acclimated, and then I can lay out on the beach. So that's what we're doing for our plants.
I get sunburned too. Don't worry. Okay, next question. We had quite a few come in. So David, you tell me when you're ready to move on. If you use a grow light, how many inches from the container do you place the light?
So I want to get as close as I possibly can. See, what's happening is old school guy here. Like I used to use fluorescent lighting. Let me back up a second. So if you have like just a traditional incandescent light,
okay,
they produce a very high light intensity. They also produce a lot of heat. And so we would have to keep that light pretty far back, like 2-3 feet from the plants, because the heat from the lamp would injure them. We move towards fluorescent tubes. Those give a lower light intensity, but they also produce much less heat. So that if I'm doing a fluorescent tube, I'm going to set it down within a few inches of where those seedlings are growing up. What I would be doing today is I would be taking a real serious look at LED lights, because now we have LED lights that give us the greatest amount of intensity, the best efficiency that goes in there. They have them the ideal light spectrum, and they're not producing any heat off of them. They just don't get hot. So I can place those really close to the plants. Depending on design, I'm talking it might be a few inches, or certainly with no more than 12 inches. I mean, you put those up real close on them because they are not going to produce any heat. And that's, if I was starting out, that's where I would be looking at going.
Do you just want to put those lights out once the seedling has emerged, or is that something you just put out from the beginning?
Really, I would just put them on there from day one. We're not doing this on a huge scale. You don't have to do that, but as soon as they start to pop up through the soil, as soon as you start to see light, signs of life, that's when I put that light on them. There are some plants that actually require light to germinate. So that's where I would say I would just be, they cost almost nothing to run and operate. They're so high efficiency. I would just put them with the lights on there from day one.
Okay. And I just want to confirm this. I was talking to Chris Purdue about this a couple weeks ago. Cool season vegetables are fine to go now. That April 22nd date, that's for warm season. Is that correct?
Right. So this way we get a little weird. It's like you're absolutely correct. So there are frost tolerant plants, things like spinach, just talking about, spinach, parsley, cabbage, kale, broccoli, a whole bunch of these things that are frost tolerant plants that can be planted outdoors, even now. So this is very much a plant by plant kind of situation. And the ones that I'm talking about today are the frost tender plants that we cannot put outside now, but I want to go ahead and get some seeds started. So I'm trying to get a head start on that growing season.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Just wanted to confirm that. Okay. Our next question, and again, tell me when we need to move on, is how does the seed starting soil differ from regular potting soil?
So a lot of the potting mix will have things like aged bark, shredded, composted bark, pine fines in it. And some of these, they're what I call chunkier. It's a coarser texture in there. It works really well if I'm growing a mature plant or a house plant or something, with an established root system. But again, if I'm a tiny little tomato seed and I get a chunk of bark sitting on top of it, that can be enough to inhibit its germination. So the seed starting mixes have been screened to take the larger chunks out of it. You can use a potting mix, just a regular potting mix, but it's not quite as well because a lot of times they will have that heavier, denser material in there.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. With thinning, how far apart do the seedlings need to be from each other? Actually, when you have those trays, are you aiming for one per tray?
That's exactly what I was going to say, because we're not trying to grow them to maturity or anything like that. Ultimately, my goal is basically one plant per cell if I'm doing those in those cell plants. There's other techniques, ones that I don't particularly go along with. Sometimes people will grow their seedlings in a very dense tray and then transplant, separate them out of there and plant them into the cell packs. That's an additional step. It's additional disruption to the seedling, sets it back a little bit. So that's just not a way that I recommend, but there are all different ways to do this.
Okay. All right, we have two more questions that have come in. How young can I transplant frost tolerant seedlings?
So if I was putting them out now, I would still have frost cloth or frost blanket available to me because we are at that point where the weather's real variable. So this is kind of like I had somebody just yesterday come in. They have a tray they had beets, radish, cauliflower, even cabbage in there. I think some broccoli. These are all cool season frost tolerant plants. But like we were saying, they have not really been acclimated to growing outside on their own. We're at that time of year where we know we're still going to get some freezing temperatures. So I'm like, hey, you can put them in the ground today, but if we're going down below freezing, I would feel more secure putting a frost cover over them. So after they've had a little bit of time, after been exposed a couple of times, then they should be fine. I mean, then they can stay outside even through the cold weather, the freezing
Okay.
temperatures.
Okay. All right, we had another one come in. What about using a dome? I have one, but only about half of my seedlings have sprouted, and I'm not sure if I should take the top off yet.
I would keep the top on there. Eventually, when your seedlings get to what I call like the two leaf stage, not so a seed comes up, they call it the two cotyledons. You get the two, they look like seeds, but they're not. So you get the first set of two leaves come up usually. Those are not true seeds. After that, you'll have another set of leaves come out. By the time you get to that second or maybe third seed set of leaves, then you probably want to take that humidity dome off, give them a little more space to grow, a little more room to breathe.
So you want 2 or 3 sets of the actual leaves, not the like little baby leaves that are the first
Exactly.
ones
We're
that
going to
grow.
kind of ignore the first set. They're not true leaves. Those are actually part of the seed. We're going to kind of ignore that, but after the second or third set of what look like leaves come.
Okay. All right, here we go. Any tips or tricks on this has happened to me on the actual transferring of the seedling to the ground? Usually when I do it, the seedling, soil, and root ball, it all falls apart.
Maybe you just didn't give them enough time. If you see ones that come again, I'm saying like that, if you buy transplants from us, coming out of a commercial growing thing, you can pull that out, and that ball of roots should hold together. Should be pretty dense, tight ball of roots that keeps it together. So maybe it's just not giving them enough time to reach a point of maturity and everything there. You do need to handle them gently. Obviously we don't want to pinch or crush the stem on it because that could kill the plant. We handle them by the leaves. Or another thing I like about those little plastic inserts is you can take your fingers, you sort of press on the underneath and sort of try to pop them out without injuring the plant.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you this now before I forget and it gets lost in the chat. We had someone ask when are you available if people want to come in and talk to you in the store when they're getting their seed shopping done?
Um,
I
so
don't.
it's hard because schedules vary day to day.
Yeah, so I was like, I think they're changing soon. So
Well, what I was going to tell you, I mean, in general terms, I work Tuesday through Friday at the Fair Oaks location, and I work Saturdays at the Maryfield location in Falls Church. But on any given day, my exact hours will change and shift. That's part of retail life, where I can have a customer walk in and dominate my time. So I'm there, I'm available. I want to see you, but the best thing is if you need to see me, just call first. But I am here 5 days a week, one place or another.
Yeah. Okay. So just call ahead. All right. We've had one more question come in.
Let's do that, and then we'll talk about the stopping weeds, how to not grow them.
Perfect.
Not grow seeds.
Okay. I had a humidity dome without great ventilation in a small container and noticed a little bit of mold. Should I poke more holes in the dome first to ventilate, or should I remove it entirely for continuing to grow the seeds?
Two things. One is that's why I do like to use fresh seed starter, and we sell brands. It's just one I brought up to me because I want to make sure my media is as sterile as possible, clean to begin with, so that can reduce or cut down the amount of molds and stuff that can show up that's in there. If you're still having problems, a little bit of mold showing up on the surface, I would lift that humidity dome off, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. You can lift that off, let it dry out a little bit, and then put it back on. There are some humidity domes, and these go up a little bit in cost, that actually allow you to ventilate. They'll have little openings on the side, so they'll allow you to control the ventilation. But yeah, you can do kind of like an on and off thing to help reduce some of that humidity if you're starting to get some mold. So let's go back to the slides real quick, and then we'll still have time for some questions. But I thought, well, we'll spend the first time talking about growing seeds, and now I'm going to change the conversation to about how to not grow seeds. So when talking, and this is like we've been talking about with annual plants, you'll go, when I say an annual, you go through this cycle where a seed is there, seeds lying dormant. When the soil temperatures get right, the temperature and moisture is correct, that seed begins to sprout, and then it continues to mature and flower. So it repeats that cycle in a period of, one growing season where it goes all the way from seed to maturity and then it dies. So what ends up happening at this time of the year is, there are seeds that are sitting there waiting in the soil. We've got what we call a seed bank that's in the ground because, for example, you've seen it like it's an image of a dandelion. If a dandelion goes to seed, I'm guessing that's probably at least 1,000 seeds that get dispersed on the wind. They land somewhere and they're just waiting for the time is right, temperature, moisture, and opportunity. Then boom, they're going to sprout and grow. So what I'm talking about right now is how we can prevent this from happening. So what we can do is before that seed sprouts, we can put a product down, a material down that will prevent that from growing. So this is what I'm talking about, my seed prevention that's there. So we'll just keep going with a couple more slides here. So if you were to go out in your garden or your lawn today and you start seeing these little flowers blooming, these are what we call winter weeds, right? So they grow in the cool weather, just like we were talking about some of the vegetables and flowers that might be growing in cool weather. So that seed, that little picture you see in the circle, I took that picture in September. So a lot of seeds might actually start sprouting in September, October, November during the cool weather. And then today you go out in your garden, you say, where did all this stuff come from? Well, that's what I'm telling you. This is a winter annual weed that grows through the cool season and it flowers in the spring and then dies. I've also got a close-up image on some of the real common weeds. We'll scroll through that just real quickly. So here we're looking at this one that's called bittercress. It's out now. If you start looking about, this is what customers are beginning to bring into us. As in the mustard family, it forms like these little seed pods that then explode when they're ripe and catapult their seeds out. So this is appearing at a garden near you. Another one that comes in here, right? Chickweed, also very common. I have not seen chickweed actually blooming, but it will be real soon. Again, just depending a little bit on the weather. Maybe even now we've had some warm sunny days. Another very common one here is dead nettle, a member of the mint family. This got pretty purple flowers, but when you're looking at these things saying, hey, where did all this stuff come from? I said, these are seeds that were lying dormant. They started sprouting in last fall and late winter. Now they're popping up out of the ground. And then after flowering within, let's say by June, they are dead. They're gone. Those are winter annual weeds. The message I'm trying to get to you right now, though, is as they're dying out, there are summer annual weeds that you don't see that will start growing in the next several weeks ahead. So the idea is we want to act now to get a pre-emergent, a weed preventer down so that we don't see these weeds show up later in the season. The way this stuff works is you put it down, it forms a chemical barrier on the surface of the soil. And the seed's not dead, but when that seed begins to grow, when that little primary root, that radical starts to pop out from the seed coating, it hits this chemical barrier. It's not able to cell division at the root tip stops, and it's just not able to grow. It's not able to get established, and it prevents those weeds from growing in there. So this is, like I said, the first half of the show, we're talking about, we want to grow plants. Here's where I'm talking about where we don't want. We're trying to stop this thing from growing, or I'm saying in this case, weeds. So we put this chemical barrier down, and there's a lot of different products that we can use. Just to simplify, I'm going to talk about two of them, just to make it easy to follow, because I hate getting too caught up in these different trade names. So this is one, this Preen crabgrass control is one that we recommend, and it works for most lawns because it's not just crabgrass. It works in about 40 different weeds. The thing to be aware of it with it, though, is it only remains effective for about 3 months. So if I put it down, let's say April 1, this goes April, May, June, and then it expires and the weed seeds start popping up in July, August, September. So we really do recommend 2 applications a year of this to maintain full season-long treatment on it. But other than that, it's a very good weed preventer. And whether you put it down now or 4 weeks from now, we're kind of in that window. We're, to take this preventative action. And this again is labeled specifically for lawns. The other one I wanted to show you is called, okay, so you guys probably know crabgrass, stiltgrass. That's just examples of summer weeds that you don't see them now, but you could encounter them in the future. So that's the whole idea of trying to stop that. We'll just scroll through this and get to, to the next one. So gallery, this one that we put in, it is specific to broadleaf weeds. It does not work on crabgrass or stiltgrass or other weedy grasses, but it does work on things like dandelions and clover and chickweed and broadleaf weeds. This can be used in either your lawn or your landscape beds. So let's say if, almost like they're showing in that image there, hey, if I've got trees and shrubs, landscape bed planted adjacent to the lawn, I can put this in both the lawn and the landscape bed as a preventative treatment to reduce the amount of weeds from showing up this summer. Now, that one application can last up to 5 months. So this is something, if we put it down now, it really should last us throughout the entire growing season. A little caution here, like I said, these things stop seeds from being able to get established. So if I'm trying to seed my lawn or plant new flowers or grow things from seed, we cannot use this. This is just a preventive treatment, but it also excludes us from being able to do any seeding. So, and I remember I actually put a third one in there and then we'll stop. These are broadleaf weeds that the gallery prevents. You don't see them now, but we can prevent them seeing this summer. And we'll go on to one more picture that I wanted to show you. If you are working in your lawn and you say, well, I really feel like I need to do some seeding to patch up some bare spots. At the same time, I got a history of trouble with weeds and I'm trying to do both. This product is a specialty product. It's the only one that lets you do this. It does allow you to put down a weed preventer. It is a starter fertilizer with a weed preventer that can be used at the same time as seeding. Again, always talk to our specialists because we want to make sure that you get the right product, because the others, you're not allowed to use them with seeding. But this does allow you a way where you can have your cake and eat it too. If you feel like I need to do some seeding and also want to get ahead of weed problems. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and we'll go back to some questions.
All right, everybody, please go ahead and start sending in your questions. I'll start with the first one that we have. This is about seeding your lawn. How long do you wait before seeding if you're using preen? Is it the same 60 days that you discussed?
Yeah, basically, I think preen is the preen weed preventer, the yellow bag. I'm going wrong. I think it has, we double checked the label, but I think it has about 10-week wait time. So most of these products, if I put it down and I'm telling you, hey, I got to wait, 10 weeks for seeding, that puts you into summer. It's just not going to work for you.
Okay. I'm not sure what this is. Which of the weed preventers do not contain neonics?
So neonics are used for insect control.
Gotcha.
They're not an herbicide, they're an insecticide. So they are not a component on any of these.
Okay. With the Fertilome broadleaf weed control, do you have to water it within 24 hours like you have to do with preen? We have large beds and cannot water very easily.
It does need to be watered in to activate it. All these things do, because basically there's a soil treatment. We're trying to create this chemical barrier on the surface of the soil. I don't know that it has to be within 24 hours. I think even if it's within like 48 hours, you should get really good results. But I'm glad you brought that up. If you're not able to water it in, what most of us do, and most people, we're kind of watching the forecast, putting it down, a day or so before the rain is expected, and then just let nature do the watering for us.
Okay. Next question. We just had a bunch come in. Until what date can you put gallery in your flower beds?
There's not really an exact deadline on that, but I really do like to get it down, say, before the 1st of May. what we end up doing, like in our like our lawn calendar, I look at it as sort of a window of opportunity. If I said that right now, March 13th, this is the early side of that window of opportunity. And if I even went even as late as, let's say, May 15th, that would be very late on that window of opportunity. So somewhere within those dates, I think is probably still worth doing. But the real kind of sweet spot, I'll say, is kind of like a March 15 to April 15 would be my ideal timing. But hey, we've got a little bit of leeway that you can go on either side of that.
Okay, we just had a question that kind of came up that's similar. Can you use gallery or preen in ornamental beds if you're going to be planting plants? So is the reason the timing's important because of when you're planting, or is there?
Well, there's a couple different parts to this. Of the way this stuff works is, like I said, if this is the surface of the ground, and I put it and I form this chemical barrier on the surface. My existing plants, their roots are down here. They're below that chemical barrier. There's no contact in there, so there's no risk to them. If I'm now say, hey, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to plant some annuals. Well, I don't really want to do that because then they're going to come in contact with that chemistry is there. So if I'm going to be doing some planting, and I do this because I love planting seasonal annuals, I would wait, and then after I have installed my annuals and everything's placed in the ground, then you could put the weed preventer in on top of the ground. Because otherwise, yes, if it actually gets into the soil where it could contact the roots, it would injure the plants.
Okay, okay. Next question. I enjoy hand weeding, but are there some weeds that I would be spreading inadvertently by hand weeding?
Uh, Two comments I want to make on that. One is I am totally on board with hand weeding when I talk about things like these weed preventers. This is usually in areas that are too big, just too expansive, or some kind of physical limitation you can't get to it. And so we might go with that route. As far as can I spread weeds with hand weeding? Absolutely. The answer is yes. There's actually been some studies that show sometimes if you're hand weeding, if you're pulling, you're disturbing the soil and kind of creating a little bit of a seed bed now for more weeds to grow. So my thing is, yeah, go with it, do the hand weeding, but never leave just exposed soil behind where it can get repopulated. After I've done that, if I've disturbed the soil and I've got exposed areas, make sure that you're either putting something pretty back in that place, put some flowers there to occupy that space, or put a little bit of mulch or some type of cover to prevent new weeds from popping back in there.
Okay, okay. Next question. How do we time pre-emergent with rain? We're expecting thunderstorms on Saturday. And then she followed up and said, basically, can the rain be too heavy and wash away the treatment?
Uh, like if we're getting a half inch, an inch of rain, then that's a good thing. It's very rare that we get much more than that in a single, like in an hour downpour. But yeah, if we were having like tropical storm, torrential rains, that's too much. But up to like say of 1 inch rainfall, that would be ideal.
Okay, gotcha. And I'm just going to add now because I have started forgetting this, but we do get, for those of you who may not be from the Virginia area, this is all based on Virginia's climate, Northern Virginia area, Garden Zone 7. So if you are someone who gets torrential downpours regularly, then that's what David's discussing here. So,
yeah, yeah, the ideas stay the same, but
yeah.
the products and timing might vary.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. With Fertilome, do you have to wait 60 days also before planting things like small shrubs, or is it just for seed?
Let me put this, if I'm doing any planting, if I'm planting annuals, trees, shrubs, I pretty much want to make sure I have at least that 60-day interval. And I'm going to tell you, that's what's on the label. I'm not even totally comfortable with that kind of thing, because If this stuff gets into the soil and it gets in contact with the root tips of the plant, it disrupts their cell division and inhibits their growth. So I'm pretty cautious on this. I would much rather use it in established beds or lawns where I'm not going to be doing any planting for at least 60 days. And
Okay.
I'm going to give myself even like a buffer and say 90 days because I just don't like taking chances like that.
Okay. Here's a quick question. Is the Scott Turf Builder product for weed control, is that Scott Step 1?
Uh, yeah, they keep
Scott's
changing the name, and depending on the size of the bag, I have a 5,000 square foot bag that says Scott Step 1, and then I've got that little small bag that says Scott's Triple Threat or something. This is like all marketing stuff, but it must be labeled. The words that you're looking for says for seeding.
okay.
They will always say for seeding because Scott's has so many different products and names and they change it. I think every 6 months or something, but it will say for seeding is a critical word that you need to look for.
Okay. Um, all right, next question. Can preen be used under a deck to control weeds? We have landscape fabric and rock coverage, but weeds are still popping up.
Uh, yes, but that reminds me, I want to qualify that a little bit. I just hate this part about the business. So preen is a trade name. There are probably at least half a dozen, if not a dozen, different names that have the preen title on it. So there's like if I talk about a pre-emergent for landscape beds, which is what you would probably want to use under your deck, it might sell under 4 different names. The very best one I'm going to tell you for that use, in my opinion, is you would look for what's called preen extended control. And so it's usually in an orange bag or an orange container, but again, that will change, but you probably want the one that's called extended control.
Okay. Next question. Will transplant soil change when you put it into the gardening bed outside?
Uh, if I'm understanding the question, the answer is like the soil that we use for seed starting is a different soil mix than what we would be using for planting out in the lawn and garden. You can use the same soil, except the seed starter sells at a premium price. You're paying more for it because it's had this additional processing and screening and it's slightly different ingredients. So if we're talking about seed starting material, seed starting soil, I would really use that just for seed starting because I don't think it warrants the additional expense if I'm planting outside. I don't know if I understood the question correctly, but
That
that's
that sounds correct to me. If you need any clarification, let us know. All right, let's see. This is our last one for now. We may get a couple more. If you all have more, now's the time to send them so we don't end right as your question's coming in. Um, I'm looking at a packet with radish and it says it germinates in 7 to 14 days. Is it too early to start them now? To start the seeds
yeah.
now.
So I personally I prefer so I prefer to take a seed like that and direct sow because radishes, what I'm saying is I don't start them indoors. They grow so quickly of you could just plant them directly into the ground in your garden because like I said, hey, they germinate within 7 days. You could actually be harvesting them probably, 30 days later. They also like cool weather. So you could go out and if you're here locally, kind of our zip code area, and I would be okay just planting radish seeds out in my garden even now in March. If you wanted to start them inside, just because you're trying to maximize rotation of crops or something like that, you I've lost track of the question, but the answer would be yeah. I mean, you could start them now, but I prefer just to put them straight into the ground outside. I do feel that way a lot with root crops, carrots and radishes and everything. I put some little potatoes in here, like they're not really seeds, but if I want to grow potatoes, any of these kind of root crops, you can pretty much get started putting them in your garden. I'm saying now or next week or next couple weeks, and skip the indoor starting side.
Okay. We have some clarification on this transplanting soil question. This person's using raised garden beds. So their question is, after they transplant the plant, what soil should they be using in the raised garden bed?
Ooh, that's a whole big question.
We're actually doing a whole class on that on the 29th. I'll send the link out to everybody. Y'all can get a jump. It's limited
Okay.
attendance,
Uh,
but
yeah, it depends a lot on the size of your garden beds and stuff, and everybody's got their own recipe that's in there. Just my real quick short answer is I'm a big fan of bumper crop. It's a mix of about 5, 6 different types of organic compost mixed together. That's what I like to incorporate into the ground if I'm planting. But yeah, if Sally can send you a link, or maybe we can talk about more detail with the specifics, the size of your raised garden bed and everything. Uh, I'm all about doing it, but if we just need to get the specifics.
okay. Um, yeah, so I just sent a link out to everybody. We're three of our plant specialists at the Gainesville store who do a lot with raised garden beds, container vegetable gardens, and general vegetable gardens are doing a class on the 29th. It's limited, so y'all can have a jump on it because we haven't emailed out about it yet. Um, but they're going to be covering raised garden beds specifically in that class, along with container gardens and how to seed start and how to pick your seeds and how to plan the whole thing. So that should be a good one. They're excited. Next question. Okay, so with the fertilome, so like the in the flower garden beds, if it's harmful to the roots of like new plants or shrubs or annuals, can you explain it a little more? I think you covered this, but can you go back and explain why it's not harmful to the roots of an established plant?
Well, because it binds to the soil. It's chemically bound to the soil. So if I put the fertilome and I apply it to my garden bed, it sticks to the surface of the soil. It doesn't wash away. It doesn't leach into the ground. It sits there right on the surface of the ground. So the roots, it never contacts the roots, because the roots, let's say, are down here. If this is my soil, my roots are down here under the table, and my chemical is up here on the top of the table. They are physically separated. They do not come in contact with each other. So as long as they don't touch each other, hey, we're golden. Everything's fine. The problems come in is if I inadvertently, or what, somehow it gets mixed into the ground, um, that's where it could potentially have a problem. But yeah, otherwise they're physically separated from each other, if that clarifies.
Okay. Next, this is our last question. We've got a couple minutes, so if anyone has anything just now, send it in right now. Could you remind us of the time difference between planting grass seed and weed control? Okay, so what's the time difference there?
Uh, the safe thing is to wait until the new grass has been mowed 3 times.
Okay.
So that what that tells me is by the time that grass has grown in and it's been cut 3 times, that's a pretty clear signal. It says, okay, those roots are well enough established now. They've made their way deep enough in the ground. This kind of fits what we're talking about. So now I know that that plant's well rooted. They are anchored into the ground, and I can now proceed with my basic routine weed
Okay.
treatments.
Perfect. All right. Well, that was our last question, David. So do you have anything you'd like to wrap up with before we conclude?
No, just excellent talking with everybody. Like I said, we're here at the Plant Clinic to help you these kind of questions all the time. I love the workshop. I think we talked about one of our planning meetings, so I know that's
Yeah,
going
we did. Yeah.
so you definitely want to take advantage of that. If for some reason, like, hey, you can't get there, you want to get an early start, come in and talk to us. We're always here to help.
Yeah, and y'all have about 24 hours, maybe a little less before we send that out to everybody. It is limited seating because they wanted to be able to work individually with everybody. So I suggest if you are wanting to do some vegetable garden planning, you will get all of your supplies to start seeds. That's included in the ticket price. So recommend checking that out. The instructors are fantastic. I love them. Everybody loves them. But David,
Oh, so
thank
by
you.
watching the virtual plant clinic, they get a little special opportunity. They know it's coming. They're the first
Yeah,
to.
well, we did that for your pruning class too, you know. So yeah, if you guys tune into Virtual Plant Clinic, we're doing these new workshops now. that are limited attendance. So you get a little specialized attention. And if you're on the Plant Clinic, a lot of times I'll give you jump start on the registration.
So one more reason you gotta tune in and watch us here in a couple weeks from today.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Everybody, keep an eye out for that recording on our YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. And of course, stop by the store if you want to see David. Thanks all. Bye.
All right, have a good day.